Salutations, everyone. Welcome to AOE Podcast. I know it's been a bit, things have been busy. A lot of things have changed in my life since the last podcast. I got a fidget spinner, so things are looking up. Went to Comic-Con, or like smack dab in the convention season. And what I want to talk about for today's episode are fandoms and just the way that the world is kind of changing with the internet and creativity and the way that people are starting out. We've seen this a lot with, YouTubers or writers where they start their work online, they do it for free, they do it passionately, for fun, and then it ends up exploding into a career. We've seen this for some singers that started on YouTube, or maybe used a platform and then jump started once they went over to YouTube, or Instagram models is like a thing that you can be now, and lots of entrepreneurs out there. Everyone's got an Etsy shop. Everyone's got a Patreon. Just so many things that people are using to start their own careers in a very unique way that wasn't possible even 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you couldn't make money off of YouTube. 10 years ago, there were no Etsy shops. There was no store envies. You couldn't make a living as a professional cosplayer, for as far as I can tell. And just the way that things have just so drastically changed when it comes to people's passions. And they say if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And a lot of people have kind of taken that to heart, and in a lot of ways hard work is paying off a lot more, because you take a look at music. Music is a very, very good example about how like decades are defined, right? Because in the 50s was this, 60s this, 70s, 80s has its own classic music, 90s. And then once you get into like music, and I guess fashion has kind of always been the same, but because of music was so limited in that you had to buy it on a vinyl or a 8-track or a cassette or a CD, and then things became digital, and some of my favorite musicians are doing it without a record label. They're just releasing free stuff on SoundCloud and dropping their own mixtapes, and a lot of them have gotten to do that for years and now are finally releasing their first album, or they've had a couple of albums now, and they're on iTunes and they're making money, and that's awesome. And that's something that wasn't possible in the aughts or the 90s or the 80s. So that's why this decade, the 2010s are so, and in a lesser extent in the 2000s, this decade is so difficult to establish its own soundtrack, really. I mean, obviously there's big pop hits and, Gangnam Style and Call Me Maybe. And it's like, there are polarizing huge things, Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, Eminem, what have you. But we have so many more choices now that I'll almost never hear a song on the radio whenever I'm near anywhere where a radio is playing. I think radios are antiquated nonsense, and you should never listen to radio or Shazam or iMusic or whatever those weird things are, because I can choose whatever music I want to listen to. And because you don't have to become a garage band and then get noticed and then go on tour to be known, you just got drop a mixtape on SoundCloud, and maybe it's only 1,000, but that balloons into 10, 20, 100,000 people. Boom. That's something that you couldn't do back in the day. It's a lot easier there's a lot more people trying to get noticed because it's accessible. It's so much more accessible. And that's so awesome, because there were probably bands or singers, in the past that could have been good if they got noticed, if they got a cohesive band together, or got someone to write for them, or what have you. Just get a garage, just get that shit on GarageBand and get some mixing in there if they didn't have somebody to do their mixing for them, and drop a beat. And now all of that is possible. So there's obviously a lot more competition trying to be a professional YouTuber or vlogger or Instagram model, or I know Viner's not a thing anymore, but for a while that was a career that people could have, possibly. A lot of people see it and they see people's success and they think it's fun and they enjoy it, so they want to do it too. None of that is really new, but it seems to be, in a lot of people's eyes, more accessible. And it's good to see young people not go through school and think, oh, I have to be a firefighter or a cop or a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse or a teacher, and that's it. You know, back in the day, if you asked a kid what they want to be, it would be like one of 7 answers, and that was so boring. And obviously, you know, if you ask a 5-year-old, they'll still say firefighter or, you know, doctors, you know, just because that's what kids know their jobs are. But, you know, there's a lot more choices out there, and I think there's more freedom to fail in a sort of sense. And we've seen, just because of the internet, change so many different careers. And I think this is exemplified none better than Sonic Mania, a game that just came out. I did get a chance to play both Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces at San Diego Comic-Con. Got to play one level of Sonic Mania that included a boss battle, and Sonic Forces, I got to play 2D side-scrolling Sonic fighting 3D Eggman, and that was cool. And then the regular, you know, 3D Sonic gameplay, and that looked really fresh and really sharp and good voice acting and everything. And that looks like that game could be fun. And then you have the OCs, the original character levels. Those could be kind of weird. You have like a weapon. I don't know what kind of customization is happening. Those levels might be a little bit annoying because the platforming was kind of off in certain places, a little frustrating. But I think that game might be fun as well. But Sonic Mania, the highest reviewed Sonic game in 15 years or something like that, going back to, you know, the 2D style, it's a fan-made game. That is a game that was made by fans, like Star Wars. Everyone involved, almost everyone involved in Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and you know, the one that's coming out at the end of this year, they grew up as Star Wars fans, and now they're making Star Wars. You know, because it's been a thing for over 30 years, and people making Sonic games now are Sonic fans. They grew up with Sonic, and they made fan art about Sonic, fan animations, fan-made games. That's what these people did. The developers of Sonic Mania, they made Sonic games. They made a port of Sonic CD or 3D, and then they got a cease and desist from Sega. But then Sega was like, you know what? No, you're good. We're not Nintendo. We aren't going to fuck this up. And Sega has really been good at being hands-off with the fan-made games. We know there's some weird ones out there because Sonic has a long history. It was kind of like right in the sweet spot of, you know, the 90s and 2000s of people growing up with things, introduced a lot of people to that furry lifestyle, making games, making animatics, pixel art, all kinds of things. Fan fiction, that's a big thing with Sonic, as we know. Just because like it just came out at the right time, was so successful, and branched out across a lot of media. You had the Archie Sonic comic books, you had the video games, you had the 2D, you had the 3D, you had the cartoons, you had, you know, Sonic X and all that good stuff, and all of the, you know, the interesting characters. And Sonic Boom, if you guys haven't seen Sonic Boom, it's been out for a few years now. It's actually super fucking funny. Like, you wouldn't think it was, but they're very, very self-aware, and they make some insanely good jokes that you would not expect from anything that you would actually see on cable television. I mean, it's not like super crass or crazy, you know, Rick and Morty, South Park kind of stuff, but it's kind of, you wouldn't expect this from, you know, if you watch Sonic X or, you know, Kirby Right Back at You, or, you know, 4Kids stuff. It's not the kind of jokes you would expect that would just come out of left field. Like, that was really smart, that was really funny, that was really self-aware kind of stuff. So just look up funny moments in Sonic Boom and you'll see what I'm talking about. But Sonic Mania was, like I said, these, I don't remember, it was 1 or 2 guys, they made a port of Sonic 3D or Sonic CD, Sega was like, cease and desist. Oh, okay, wait, maybe not. And then they hired them to port that game. And then they made them port Sonic 1 and 2, I believe, on, I don't know what platform was Virtual Console or DS or something. And then they was like, we want to make a game. And then the Sonic team's like, all right, let's ask, the Sonic team, let's ask the head honcho. And he was like, I don't know. Okay, Sonic Mania. Boom, here's the logo, and then it just went off. This game was made by fans. The starting, intro sequence, that was animated by someone who made Sonic fan animations and just did that. That was just a hobby, a side project of them, and then they made official Sonic cinematic. So like that's absolutely crazy, and that's something that we don't really see all that often in the past. But when it comes to obviously like long-standing franchises like Sonic or Star Wars, that kind of thing is possible. So Sonic Mania is a fan-made game. It's made by fans, and it's official. They got the official go-ahead and all the branding and everything. And it was a passion project, and you can kind of see that. I've been watching the Game Grumps playthrough of it. I'm not huge into Sonic 2D as an idea on my own to spend money, which I would allocate elsewhere because I don't have a ton of money in my life, and I never have. But I grew up on Sonic 1 and 2 and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and Sonic Spinball. I never had Sonic and Knuckles or Chaotix, but and then I made the transition to 3D like everyone else, and I still think to this day Sonic Adventure 2 is one of the greatest video games ever made, and I don't know why they Sonic Team keeps on refusing to not put the Chow Garden in any Sonic game, because I don't know, they don't want my money. Because if Sonic Forces had the Chow Garden, which they confirmed they are not having in that game, I would buy it instantly day one because that was my shit. But even without it, Sonic Adventure 2 is, I think, one of the best games ever made. That's just my opinion. We can get into that. But Sonic Mania is a fan-made game, and that is an awesome change that we see happening. Whenever someone makes something Nintendo, boom, cease and desist the next day. We saw that Pokemon Nuclear or something with nuclear. I can't remember, but that fan-made Pokemon game that was being worked on for years and years and years, and like, all right, we're finally done, and they're like, boom, cease and desist, and after like 2 or 3 days they took it off. And Sega makes a totally different approach to that, and that's pretty smart, because so many people are passionate about Sonic and have been making all these things for years, that it keeps the brand alive without any effort on their end. And even the bad Sonic games, we can all agree that there are bad Sonic games, and they still sell well because it's just a beloved franchise targeted towards kids. So kids are going to always buy it. They're always going to like it. Kids are very easy to please. If any of us take a long look at, us when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, we'll look back and like, I liked that. I was a fucking idiot. We could all do this. And there's some things we're still nostalgic for. There's some things like, I remember that and I like it because the nostalgia factor, or I can see why I would like it, or, that's still pretty good, super cheesy or whatever, but still done fairly well. But there are some things that's like, wow, I can't believe I was totally into that show or game or movie or what have you. We could all look back at our past and be like, what was I thinking? No matter really how old you are, unless you're still 8 years old, in which case wait some time. Maybe you think you were stupid when you were 4. It's like, oh, Barney, that bullshit. I don't know. Dora the Explorer, kids nowadays, I don't know what they're going through. I'm old by internet standards, I guess. I don't know, not really, but it's just the way that things make you feel. That kids are born in the year 2000 are now submitting college applications. That's just the kind of thing that I'm talking about. It's just it's kind of weird. Time moves on and everybody gets older. That's just the way things work. But when it comes to fan-made content, it is definitely a realm that has garnered a lot of respect. Take a look at the writing world. I was at a panel at Comic-Con I was just in the room because I wanted to be in the Life is Strange Before the Storm panel. So I went to the panel before it because it was in the same room. And it was kind of, it was a lot about fan fiction and diverse characters and writers and LGBTQ characters in fiction. And one of the things they talked about was one of them was an editor. She was an editor for a publishing company, and she was talking. She was asked about how fan made content, fan fiction, how that has changed. You take a look at the best fucking selling book in the entire universe, 50 Shades of Grey. It's a Twilight fanfic, and she just changed the names and took out the vampire stuff. But it started out as a Twilight fanfic. This is a well-known thing. You can look it up. Don't take my word for it. And it became the best-selling book of all time. And, I mean, obviously, it's very, very poorly written, and it's a terrible story, and is very anti-feminism, and really fucked up shit. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just saying that's a thing that happens. And the way publishers have changed their attitudes towards fan fiction of copyright materials to where it's a very, very good place to start, and a lot of people will recommend to start off with fan fiction. If you are having some trouble getting your own work out there, start with fan fiction. Start with something that you're passionate about, because if you're not passionate about your own work, it's not going to come out very well. So that's often a step that they say that you should make is write fan fiction. If you're having trouble, or if the work that you're doing right now isn't that great, write some fan fiction about something you're really passionate about, because it will come out in your work, and that just gives you practice. And that's the thing that you need a lot if you're doing anything, but especially writing, is practice. Practice, practice, practice. If you're, you want to be a professional athlete, practice, practice, practice. A lot of things that have to do with creativity or athleticism, you need a lot of practice. As Aaron Hansen once said, I didn't come out the pussy drawn Mozart. And he's right. You had to work on it. Nobody gives you talent, no matter what crazy things people believe in. It's bullshit. You worked hard on it. You practiced. That's how things happen. No one comes out the pussy drawn Mozart. That's the truth. And it's recommended to write things that you're passionate about, because that will give you the story structure. The characters are already sort of created for you, so you then start to take your liberties. I'm sure a lot of us have read fan fiction about certain fandoms and alternate universes and alternate versions of their characters and the worlds that they live in, and that's a very, very good creative exercise for you to take, and publishers are starting to accept it as a way of practice and a way of showing talent. Obviously, they're not going to publish anything if it's not an original character or story, but they no longer shun it and just completely shut it down. And we've seen a lot of success in that. All of those writers that were on that panel said that they started with fan fiction, and that's a big thing. Fandoms is such a huge, important thing nowadays, with the widespread use of the internet and groups in schools. A lot of people feel less alone than they would have in the past, because it's easier to find more like-minded people that you're really passionate about whether it's baseball or football or anime or supernatural or superhero, DC, Marvel comic books, Vertigo, My Little Pony, whatever, video games, first-person shooters, MOBAs, trading cards. If you find a like-minded group of people, you start to feel more accepted, you're more in your natural space, and you can continue to grow. That's definitely an important thing for young people. And we've seen a lot of changes. Obviously, there have been a lot of backlash against when anything changes, no matter what it is, especially if it's been one certain way for such a long time, is that storytelling nowadays is a lot more diverse, and we're starting to see that a lot more, and that's just going to become an exponential growth as the time goes on, because we've been seeing a lot of the same story structures where straight white man does a thing and gets the girl and is the hero and is a bit of a chauvinist or whatever. We've seen that a bunch, And now we're starting to see people of all different kinds of genders and sexualities and backgrounds, and people are like, oh, political correctness, or oh, why this, why now? Because now it doesn't have to be a certain way to be accepted, to get a publisher to publish it, to get a game developer to publish it or distribute it. We have seen things that we see as niche markets become very successful because they really, really appeal to that market. And if they can do that, it'll be well received no matter how many people there are. But people feel like, comic book readers are a niche market, and now they're like the biggest movies in the world. So that's just kind of a thing, the nerds are taking over kind of a thing. Take a look at Comic-Con, which I've been privy to visiting quite a few times over the years. It's the biggest convention in America, and all the media is there, all the celebrities there. Everyone wants a piece of this pie because this culture that used to be thought of as subculture, as beneath us, as geeks, losers, nerds, basement dwellers, is super duper mainstream because those kids grew up and made more of the things that they love. And I think we'll continue to see that, whether it be something like Stranger Things. These guys real big fan of the 80s, and they were D&D kids and were a fan of monsters and stuff like that. And so they made their own thing that fit very well within a decade and an era that they were really passionate about. And they did a really, really good job with it. And I think we're just going to continue to see more and more of that. I mentioned Life is Strange Before the Storm, which I super duper can't wait. And I got to see some additional footage of that game. And that was the fastest game I ever pre-ordered in my life. Super excited about that. The first game wouldn't be picked up by any publisher without changing the main character to a boy. This is the shit that still happens and will continue to happen. But Square Enix was like, no, that's fine. The main character can be a girl. So Don't Nod went with Square Enix because they allowed them to tell the story that they wanted, and it was hyper successful. We have a prequel coming out from a different developer that were fans of the first game, that didn't even work on the first game, but this is kind of like a fan-made game as well, but treated very well and is official. And there's a second Life is Strange game that's coming out that's probably going to have no connection to the first game because Max and Chloe's story is done. OTP for life, Pricefield. But that's just the kind of thing that's really, really neat to see that is kind of unique to this decade. I would say especially it's really bloomed to letting fans and letting storytellers tell the stories that they want to tell in the way they want to tell it, with a lot less overhead, a lot less, rich, grumpy, old white dudes. They're like, no, it's got to be a dude and it's got to be explosion and we got to have the chick with the hot boobs and things like that. And, there has to be romance because we got to get everybody to love this movie. And if you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. We see a lot of these mistakes with every single genre of movie and TV show and video game out there. And even some of them are, if they are successful, they aren't as successful as they could have been. There's so many things that, get changed because, we won't support it otherwise. You have to have a big name actor, or you have to have a white person, or you have to have a male in this thing. So we're seeing a lot more things breaking the mold and being successful, so that that glass is already broken in so many different aspects, in so many different ways of entertainment, in so many different genres, that it's, things are gaining respect. People are seeing, you can't make a rated R comic book movie. They're for kids. Deadpool comes out, which is super popular with kids, even though he's hyper violent. Take a look at any of the comic books or video games, and it's one of the most successful superhero films of all time because it was done correctly. If Ryan Reynolds was super duper passionate about it, and they were like, we're going for the R, and that's the only movie that we're going to make. So they're like, okay, here's your R rating. We're going to let you do what you creators want to do and be faithful to the source material. And look what happened. Super duper success. That's just, and now people are like, that's successful. So now the next rated R comic book movie isn't going to be as difficult to make. Logan wouldn't have been made 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But nowadays, it can, because people see, if we let the creators create what they want to create, the vision that's in their head, and we don't fuck with it, it ends up becoming successful because, once again, if you're passionate about it, it'll be shown through your work, no matter what it is. Maybe it doesn't appeal to everybody, and maybe it's not everything is going to be a home run, but the fact that we allow those people to take a swing at that pitch, we are going to see more home runs and triples, and this analogy is going to be lost on you if you don't know anything about baseball. But if you let them swing away, instead of telling, nope, you have to make this change to your batting stance and this and this and that, if you let more people swing, you're going to see more home runs. There may be some ones that are only ground rule doubles or dribblers up the middle, so to speak. I know I'm getting a little too deep into this baseball analogy, but it's what I'm going to use. But I think you're seeing my point here, is that when you let the creative people create what they want to create, when you let people that are passionate about Sonic make a Sonic game, then boom, the most successful review-wise Sonic game in 15 years. I mean, maybe it doesn't sell as well as Sonic Unleashed, but it's going to be reviewed a lot more. It's getting a lot more press. A lot more people are playing it, posting it on YouTube and Twitch, and that's going to help you sell more and get people excited for Sonic Forces and the Sonic game after that. So that's just a smart thing that people and higher-ups and companies are starting to do. Not every company, not every higher-up, not every director, not every publisher or developer, but we're starting to see that a lot more. And I think Sonic Mania is a good example of that. People are saying that Sonic Forces is the Sonic fanfic game because it has these Sonic OC characters where you can make your own Sonic OC, which has been a huge thing for, OC Please Do Not Steal and Sonic fanfics and So Namey and all the crazy good and questionable things to some people that have been made in the Sonic fandom. This is something that actually broke through, and now it's like official. You can make your own Sonic OC. That's crazy. While Sonic Mania is like totally made by a few fans of the game that made Sonic fan games, that made Sonic fan animations, that made Sonic fanfics. I don't know about that. But people that used to do that for fun on their own as a passion project now get to do it officially with a budget, with money, and it's really, really good. And that's shown through when, instead of just seeing, all right, here's the packaged product, this is the thing that you need to make, don't deviate from it. If you give, it's one of the things that you see a lot in game developers where they're like, they worked for one developer and then they split off on their own. They took, 3, 4, 5 people left one company after they made a game, which happens with, every company. People will leave and get fired after games, happens all the time, and they don't get paid nearly as much money as they should because it's $1 trillion industry. And they go and split off and make their own games. And a lot of these, indie projects, so they're like, oh, we don't have to work with this licensed franchise. We don't have to make a Transformers game, or we don't have to make this licensed movie game tie-in. We get to make our own characters and tell our own story, and some of those are some of the most successful and well-known games out there. We're like, all right, we have the freedom. Now let's make something we want. Now that we've had the practice, we've had some success, we know how to work with this engine. And then boom, that's how you got, Team Meat and Super Meat Boy and, Binding of Isaac, Earthworm Jim, just like a bunch of games where people worked on some licensed thing, then they split off and did their own thing, and see a lot of success with it. Take a look at something like G4, previously known as Tech TV, and we had Attack of the Show, and then that doesn't really work with TV because the audience really isn't there, and old people don't understand technology and the internet and blah blah blah. And then those people, now they're doing podcasts and they have their own internet shows. And, there's the Attack podcast and there's the Nerdist and people leaving IGN and making their own thing. And we're seeing a lot more of that as a viable option for creative people. Once they get the practice, maybe they get a fan base, maybe they don't. Depends if you're a personality or not. And if you're, in front of a camera, or if you're just making and creating stuff. Allison and Gabby, used to work for BuzzFeed, they moved out and, they did their own thing and Just Between Us on YouTube, and they're finding success with that. They wrote their own book, and that's awesome. So we're starting to see a lot more freedom available for people, and that ends up giving us better content and more content as a whole. Everyone needs to start somewhere, and not everyone can, make Bastion. Not everyone can just go out and do that. Not everyone can just go out and make Fez. No, that was a whole thing. If you guys have seen, Indie Game, the movie, or that, whatever that documentary is, it's pretty good. You should probably check it out. They go over Team Meat and I think they go over Fez as well. Or that was some other thing that I watched. And they also talked to the guy who made Bastion. Some of these things that are quote unquote indie, because that has different connotations depending on where you are. Independent of another company, going off and doing your own. We do see a lot of success. I know there are some Kickstarters out there where people end up leaving with money and not making their product, and maybe not making the product that people expected. My number 9, for instance, where they make an instruction book that doesn't fit in the box that they made. So, there's a lot of mistakes out there. There's some whiffs. I still think it's a better game than Star Fox Zero, because, motion controls. But anyway, Sega did a smart thing here, and they maybe they kind of needed that more, because they don't sell 10 million copies of every single game that they make, or every single Sonic game isn't as highly received as every Mario games, and Nintendo's really goes down hard on their copyrights of don't touch Mario or Pokemon or anything, we'll just sue the crap, cease and desist everything. And we know that Nintendo is kind of stuck in their ways, like, oh, we don't want a hard drive that's more than 4 bytes of a French fry, let alone a gigabyte, for anything. Here's the Wii, we don't want that shit HD. We need everything cute, small, and portable and cheap. And have our games never go on sale ever. They're kind of stuck in their ways. They do find success, and they do innovate a lot. Some of it doesn't age well. Some of it doesn't hit as hard, but a lot of the big risks that Nintendo has taken ended up paying off. But with Sega, they said, there's already so many people passionate about this thing that we made. Let's let them make something. And look what they made. Maybe it's not your cup of tea. It's certainly not going to be my favorite Sonic game ever. I definitely see some really cool things that they've done with that game that I'd say would make them even better than some of the old games that we all grew up on, or at least us 90s and 80s kids with the Sega Genesis and all that good stuff. They built upon that as fans, give everybody a nice nostalgia boost, as well as put their own spin on it and kind of refine and polish something that couldn't have been made back then with the technology that we have, and the gigahertz and the frame rate, and we have way more than blast processing nowadays. And look at what they made. So it's just really cool to see fans become creators and let passion drive projects, and taking a hands-off approach and letting things succeed or fail on their own, because that's kind of how all great things are made. Everyone needs help. Everyone needs an editor, if you're a writer, to help you through struggling with either your first novel or your 10th one. And you need some help. You'll need funding and all these kind of things, to where maybe you need a big break to become the next huge thing that becomes a phenomenon, and you have to be lucky and strike at the right time and all of that good stuff. But there's just so many people out there getting their own little inside the park home runs, to where they're successful within their little niche, and maybe you've never even heard of this thing, but they're super successful because they're really passionate about their thing, and people that are really passionate about that thing really, really love it. So you can have someone who kickstarted a Cthulhu board game, and now they don't have to, work a 9-to-5 day job at a Bed Bath & Beyond, because the 250,000 people who really, really love Cthulhu bought this board game, and now they have the freedom, the financial freedom to do something like that. So those are just kind of things that you pick up on when you go to conventions and you see people with the really abstract background character cosplays. You're like, oh, I know that thing. You're just as passionate about that thing that I am. Or you read a fanfic and you're like, yes, they ship it just as hard as I do. Yes, they fucked. That's awesome. Yes, they got a happy ending. Oh my gosh, finally. Yes, they fixed that problem that the canon had. So those are the kind of things that are really, really nice to see, and are going to continue to flourish. I think we're going to see more things like Sonic Mania. We're going to see more people that start off as fanfic writers and become novelists and have that be their job and have that passion. We're already starting to see it. We're starting to see YouTube celebrities become big voices. And maybe your parents haven't ever heard of Rooster Teeth or iJustine or Freddie Wong, but they're going out and doing their own thing and they're fucking killing it. And that's something that is definitely super new. Someone couldn't have been that successful 20 years ago or in the 90s or in the 80s because of so many different limitations that either the internet has freed up or the free market has freed up. And just there are more eyeballs looking everywhere. If you really, really love something, if you really, really love a ship, someone else really, really loves that ship. So if you write that fanfic, someone will find it. If you really, really want to make this game, or if you really, really want this game to be made, someone's probably making something like it. So there's something out there really for everybody, and more people are starting to find that. And I think that's just going to be a continual thing for a long ass time, because the people that are, in their mid 20s to late 30s grew up on the video games and the comic books and the things that used to be niche, that used to be just for kids, and they're bringing it to big screens, and they're getting Steven Spielberg to direct their book adaptation and crazy. I'm talking about Ready Player One. Those kinds of things are happening now. And that's really cool. And there are companies like Sega that are tapping into that. Companies that are starting to see the value in, this YouTube channel is getting 10 million views a month. That's crazy. Let's advertise. Let's do a sponsorship deal. And that's really good for them. And it's good for, those YouTube channels out there. So, the fact that we have Patreon, the fact that we have Etsy's and Store Envies and all these entrepreneurs that are able to do what they love, to go to conventions and sell their buttons and their prints, and that's super duper cool. And it just kind of makes more people happy, because the people that are passionate about it are now getting paid to do that. Probably in most cases not enough to have a living. They'll need like a quote unquote real job, but you don't have to go out and get a real job. You can actually become a streamer professionally. You can actually play a video game and get a bunch of money. Maybe not in League of Legends if you don't live in South Korea, but you could play CSGO or Call of Duty or Smash Brothers. So the world is changing and more people are starting to notice. And I just thought I'd put in my 2 cents about that, just because Sonic Mania really exemplifies a different path kind of splitting off, and we're just going to see more of it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and any topic that you would like to have me cover in a future AOE podcast. I'd be happy to hear it.